And so our job is to influence and win people back to God. Now, one of the things that we've been dealing with in our Sunday morning series is the fact that we have lost, in many cases, our love for people to come to Christ because we have lost the reality of who they are. Matter of fact, we've lost the reality of who we are. And when we fall in love with the reality of who we are, we begin to love everybody naturally because they are also God's property. Let me stress something. Every unbeliever is your family. They're just in the pig pen. You know, that prodigal son was always family. It's just that he was in the wrong place. He was lost. And you see, the brother who stayed home, I believe, he forgot that was his brother. He treated him as if he was a foreigner, a stranger. What a tragedy. And we've done the same thing, and that's why I believe Christ gave that parable. He was telling that truth to explain to us that we must be careful how we treat our lost brothers and sisters out there who are part of the family. They need to come back to themselves. Now, here's a picture of some sheep. You know, I think the whole goal of Jesus Christ is to bring people back to him. And one time he told the disciples that he see men as sheep who've gone astray. And how do you win the sheep back? How do you, we call it witnessing. I'm going to hopefully, kind of give you a new concept of that word after this thing is all finished. But witnessing is really not what it's about. Witnessing, has to do more with proof, which is very important. We need proof for folks to believe what we're saying is true. He says they are like sheep without shepherds. In other words, the world is waiting to be picked, but they haven't found the right kind of leaders to bring them to Christ. Here is a scripture that I want you to remember. Matthew 10, verse 16. Jesus Christ is talking about witnessing or winning souls back to God. And he makes this statement, quote, I am sending you as sheep among wolves. Therefore be as wise as serpents and as harmless as a dove. Now, Jesus is specifically quoting some animals here. It's important not to ignore Christ's words. Because remember that he created how many things? All things. So Jesus made a dove. He created a wolf. He created a sheep. He created these animals that he told us about. Which means that he knows their nature. He knows what they are like. And so whenever he uses them, he is the ultimate, can I use the word? He is the ultimate example giver. Because when he gives an example, he knows the creature he's using. He said, when you go to win people to Christ, first of all, you must be as if you are a sheep. He didn't say you are a sheep. He said, but you will be as a sheep among wolves. He's talking about the fact that sheep and wolves have certain natures that you need to be aware of. And then he says, you must be harmless like a dove, but he said you must be like a snake in your wisdom. Now, most of you always believe that snakes are related to Satan. That is not true. God made all things, and then God says, this is good. So a snake, a serpent, is a necessary creature, like an ant or a mosquito is. They all have their functions. And he made the snake and he made the dove. And this is one of the proofs that snakes are not the devil. Because Jesus said, you must be like a snake. In order to win people, he's talking to disciples. He said, when I send you out 2 by 2, here's how I want you to think. First, I want you to understand, not to be like a sheep, but understand that you are going out as if you are going among wolves, and therefore you may be overwhelmed by the project of winning these people to Christ. He said, so therefore you got to be like a snake to win them. And then he says, at the same time, be as harmless as dove's nature is. Let's talk a little bit about what he means by some of these things, like sheep among wolves. Write this down quickly. First of all, sheep among wolves means that the mission seems frightening. When a sheep sees wolf, something happens to the sheep. He says, when you see somebody standing there on the corner or hanging out near the park, or somebody dressed up in a tuxedo, or maybe a nice suit with a briefcase, and your first thought is, boy, how can I win them to Christ? And you are afraid right away to even talk to people. How do you break into a conversation? How do you break into people's space? How do you be the one who initiates a conversation? But he says that's the way it's supposed to seem. It seems as if it's frightening. He knows it's going to be a little bit overwhelming to you. Secondly, it means that it seemed to be something that you cannot handle. He's telling you that witnessing to people, bringing them to Christ, will seem as if you don't have what it takes to do it. But it also means that you seem harmless to them. You know, sheep seem to be harmless to wolves. What can a sheep do to a wolf? Think about it. In essence, he wants you to think in terms of when you go to people, they are not supposed to be threatened by you. Now, you know that some of the things that you've been taught and witnessing have threatened people. Matter of fact, how many of you have been turned off by somebody who attacked you before you were saved and tried to get you saved? Because they actually made you uncomfortable. Jesus said, no, you should be so likable. How many of you love a little lamb? You ever seen a little lamb? Oh, they are so cute. He said, you're supposed to be that way when people see you, when you come among them. You seem to be like a lamb. Thirdly, he says it may seem impossible. When a wolf sees a flock of sheep, who do you think becomes afraid? The sheep does. He says, when you go out to witness and win people to Christ, it may seem impossible. It's impossible for a sheep to attack a wolf. He said, when you go to win someone, it may seem like you are the weak one and they are the strong one. But what he's saying is, really, you are the strong one, but it just seems as if you are the weak one. Very important. And then, fifthly, he says, sheep do not offend wolves. You are not supposed to be offensive when you go to win people. You don't offend people. How many folks have been turned off by someone trying to win them to Christ? I mean, literally turned off even from God completely. And that's why maybe some of our families are not born again, because we've offended them by our attack mode. We also offend them by pointing out all their sins. See, let me tell you something about sinners. They know they're sinners. They don't need you to detail their sin. Matter of fact, they know a few of yours. And you're born again. So you don't offend people. Here's a verse I always remember all my life. Found in Proverbs. It says, a brother offended is harder to win than a city with walls. A brother what? Offended. You want to win folks. You can't win them, Christ says, if you offend them. So you don't make people feel mad at you before you try to win them and love them. You be like a sheep among wolves. Wolves never are offended by sheep. And then you should be non-threatening. You will never find. He says, I send you like sheep among wolves. I'm sending you not as the one who's the threat, but as the one who's seen to be the victim. Boy, what a strategy. They think that they can overpower you and they will overcome you. He said, but you want them to think that way. Be so submissive, so to speak, to the context, and yet never be a part of it. Very important. The last one is inviting. When wolves see sheep, what do they think? Food. Do people feel inviting when you show up? Do they like being with you? When we go out on the streets and walk among people in a few weeks and we begin to talk to folks about Christ, or when you go to work tomorrow, one fact, I'm going to show you some stuff. I want you to try it tomorrow, okay? If you try it tomorrow, come back next week with a report. I guarantee it's going to shock you. You're going to win more people to Christ in 1 week than you was trying to win in 10 days